Chapter 1. The Hole. It was an early spring morning, the sun shining through the large oak trees that surround the Five Quills Inn. Smoke bellowed from the chimney as the kitchen was hard at work preparing breakfast for weary travelers and patrons. If one was close enough to the door, one could hear the sound of the barkeep organizing the spirits, the clanking of tankards being washed, and some laughter of those patrons who were there early to drink in a celebration of sorts, or perhaps had yet to leave from the night before. It was there where Gundren, the dwarven businessman, was to meet an important party, one consisting of some of his most trustworthy friends he had gathered over his travels, in hopes they would accompany him on a mission of great importance. The tavern door begins to creak open. The barkeep could hardly see who it was with the brilliant morning light beaming into the dark tavern. But then appeared a small silhouette, that of what seemed to be a child. As his eyes adjusted, he realized that it was a small gnome girl who had almost seemed lost. "Can I help you?" said the barkeep. The gnome nervously said nothing, as if she had never been in a place such as this. She was then suddenly eclipsed by a large shadow. As she turned around, she looked up to find a large hooded figure adorned in deep blue-gray vestments, chainmail, and weaponry that of a soldier. Through the hood she saw the gleaming golden eyes. It was a dragonborn. "Hello, my dear," said the dragonborn in a deep voice. "Do not be afraid. I am Onadin Yerhishtaimid, and you are?" "Luna," said the timid gnome with a quaking reassurance. With her nerves eased, the two sought an empty table to where they quickly realized they were summoned for the same cause, to meet Gundren, the dwarf. Soon after, the two unlikely companions heard a boisterously loud voice come bursting out as the tavern door swung fiercely ajar, slamming into the wall of the tavern. "Hey! Let me get some of your best ale, barman!" It was a sun-bleached dwarf with a golden beard, adorned in a green cloak. Though it was hard to notice anyone other than this dwarf, right behind him walked in a quiet halfling, with his head covered in tattoos. The halfling was then followed by a bearded, long-haired half-elf, one whose humanity had shown to be the strongest in birth due to his unusually large stature, equipped with a longbow garnered with what seemed to be elven carvings. The three took a seat at the bar, and had the attention of the entire tavern. While it was seemingly difficult to hear anything over the dwarf, lurking in the shadows was a quite literally gigantic figure. As he stood, the entire tavern grew silent. He began to approach the three travelers slowly, with each step a thud echoing through the silence. "You speak of Gundren," said the giant. "Aye," said the dwarf, seemingly fearless of the 8-foot giant with a maul the size of a small tree hanging from his pack. "Then I will join you," said the now noticeable Goliath. Before the silence retreated, another had entered the tavern entrance, though only for a moment, as the armored man began to gasp and complain about the rancid scent of the giant before slamming closed the door. As the tavern grew accustomed to its new guests, the dragonborn realized that this odd group was here for the same reason as he. With a small greeting, he beckoned the four over to his and Luna's table. With a brief introduction from Onadin and Luna, the four newcomers were Ulfgar Kragbrow, a dwarven brewman and creator of the renowned ale Bugman's Brew, Danilo, the halfling monk, and Swahas Oakenthorn, the half-elven ranger from Oakwood, and the Goliath, who would not share his name. The party had but a moment to talk amongst themselves before another half-elf approached the table. "Greetings, friends. I am Elfgar, and I come on behalf of Gundren." The party seemed skeptical, as they were all expecting to meet the dwarf himself to explain the details of this mission. The half-elf brought news of Gundren's early departure just the day prior. They were to meet their dwarven friend in the town of Phandalin, with a caravan of goods required for the ambiguous task that would yet be revealed. With the group accepting the half-elf story, they exited the tavern. With their eyes adjusting from the dark tavern, the caravan Elfgar spoke of revealed itself to them. Marked with Gundren's crest, it was a small wagon attached to 2 horses, black as night. There was enough room for 2 to control the reins, and just small enough space in the back for 2 more to sit beside the goods that were covered in cloth, presumably to hide the contents from would-be bandits. Ulfgar, being suspicious, decided to inspect the caravan of its contents, as Gundren dabbles in business of all kinds. As he determined it to indeed be mining equipment, the same armored man who left the tavern early began to approach. "I see this is Gundren's caravan. I am Lord William Copperpot of Haverell, and I shall accompany you on this mission. I care not your names. If I wish to know them, I will ask," the human lord said proudly and arrogantly as he hit the ground with the butt of his spear before turning to get a head start down the path. With the group slightly taken aback by the rudeness of their newest traveling companion, they nodded with approval to Elfgar and took leave. As the wagon strolled through the lush green countryside, one could find Ulfgar drunk and asleep in the back of the wagon, taking up space that could have allowed another person to rest. Danilo silently and unexpectedly keeping pace with the wagon, even with his small legs. Lord William on the other side, quietly walking with his shield secured safely to the side of the wagon. The unnamed Goliath guarding the flank with Luna the gnome resting inside the giant's pack. While the directions to Phandalin were vague, Swahas had a natural intuition for navigation, and every so often a sign could be seen offering direction. It was soon that the party came across another traveling merchant. "Hello, friends. I am a merchant, and you seem like adventurers that could use some of my wares. Would you care to take a look?" At this moment, Ulfgar sits up violently from his slumber, wipes some drool from his beard and says, "No, you're gonna need them healing potions, mate." With a nod from the merchant, Ulfgar threw him a small pouch of 30 gold pieces, then fell back over and began snoring, very loudly. Danilo accepted the potion on his behalf and placed it in the dwarf's pouch. With the group being relatively low on coin, they bid the merchant farewell and continued down the windy dirt road. With night upon them, the group began to debate whether or not to rest or continue through the night. Though many would wish to continue through the night, the size of the wagon was just too small to accommodate enough of the group while allowing everyone a moment's rest. So it was decided to camp, and the thoroughly rested Ulfgar took the first night's watch. Lord William was set to take the second watch, and when awoken by Ulfgar, he firmly told the dwarf that he should not touch his bedroll, lest he wished to find the sharp end of his spear. Of course, as Lord William woke Onadine for his final watch, he found Ulfgar in his bed, drooling once more. Lord William outraged. Onadine, a kind follower of Bahamut, offered the noble his bedroll. Lord William, taken aback by his kindness, said, "Thank you, Dragonborn. I wish to know your name." "I am Onadine Yerhishdaimid, my lord," he replied. With a simple and brief nod, Lord William laid his head to rest. With nothing but some wildlife rustling the bush nearby, the group slept safely and soundly, until at the break of dawn there was a thunderous sound, and the ground began to shake as if the earth itself began to move beneath them. The group jumped to alert, only to be met with a stench that could only have come from the rotting corpse of a hog. The Goliath quickly woke with everyone staring down at him. "What of it?" he said. I don't give a fuck. Let's go." And so the group packed up camp and began further down the road with Lord William and Swahas taking the reins. As the group traveled on, Lord William came to realize that Swahas had possessed navigational skills that were deserving of recognition. "You," said Lord William, "I wish to know your name." "I am Swahas. I am from," said the half-elf, though he was sharply cut off by Lord William, who never took his eyes from his book. "I'm reading," said the noble lord bluntly. And so the group silently continued down the road until they came upon a sign, one reading Phandalin, that pointed east. The road east was far more wooded than the one they came from. There were large trees that overhung the road, blocking out much of the sun. The sides of the road heavy with brush that was unkempt and overgrown. It was not long before the adventuring party came upon what appeared to be 2 horses lying still in the center of the path. With caution, Ulfgar, the Goliath, and Luna, still within his pack, began to approach the horses. Curious as to what could have caused this, Swahas stood to try to get a better view of the area, when a gust of wind blew some dirt into his eyes, preventing him from seeing anything. As the Goliath approached the first horse, he kneeled, but before he could see what had caused the horse's death, an arrow came flying through, piercing the horse's hide, followed by another that drove itself deep within the shoulder of the giant. With a large roar, he cried out in pain as a pack of goblins came rushing from the cover of the brush. Taking notice, Swahas stood tall from his perch on the caravan and went to let loose an arrow. Still, apparently blinded from the dirt in his eyes, he managed to have his bow backwards and fumbled the arrow. To Lord William's disgust at the ranger's display, he rallied the defense of the caravan. Though several were wounded from the ambush, the group was able to quickly deal with the threat, causing the last goblin to retreat in fear. Swahas, frustrated by his own failures, took aim once more and delivered a strike to the back of the goblin's neck, dropping him to the ground. The goblins were defeated. Upon inspection of the bodies, the group discovered what seemed to be tracks that led from the brush, appearing to have been dragging a body of sorts. The tracks led to another path, one less traveled and too heavily littered with stone for the caravan to be able to safely make it through. The group began to gather around the horses to see if there was any more that they could discern from the corpses. The barding of these animals revealed the symbol, Gundren's crest. Same crest that adorned the caravan the group was escorting. As the group turned to discuss the recent discovery, the Goliath called out to Onadin for his axe. Onadin gave the axe over to him and then asked for him to be still. He reached his hand out on his shoulder wound, and with a small whisper, the priest's hand began to glow. The divine energy healed the wound completely, restoring the giant to full strength. Impressed with his power, the giant said, "Dragonborn, my name is Conrad." With a smile and a nod, Conrad continued to remove the dead horses from the path, and took the axe and butchered the legs of one of the horses to be used for food. With a short rest, the group decided they should investigate further. Knowing that Gundren had only left the day before, this very well could have been Gundren himself that had been taken by the goblin fiends. In order to get a better view of the path, Luna took to climbing a large oak tree. Never had they seen such a small creature climb with such grace. Upon reaching the crest of the tree, she overlooked into the lush green forest. Several birds, disturbed by her presence, took flight as she looked to the distance to see if there was anything she could learn of the path ahead. With nothing out of the ordinary, she returned to the group. Concerns began to grow over leaving the caravan unattended, but without notice, the group turned to find Luna kneeling before the caravan. Her eyes closed and fists tightly clenched around her pendant. She reached one hand to the grass, and with it the grass began to grow. The growth was enough to cover the caravan, so that to those traveling this path it would appear as a normal bush. The horses were safely tied off, and the group took to the new pathway. Ulfgar, being a self-proclaimed master of scouting, took the lead to enter the path first, to make sure there were no more goblins in wait just ahead. His stealth maneuvers met the expectation anyone would have of a drunken dwarf, and drew looks of disappointment from Onadin and Lord William. Though from the distance they could see that Ulfgar had discovered something, a small snare trap. After careful study, he reached to disarm the trap, and instead unintentionally sprung it. He leaped back just in time not to be caught in the snare, turned back and yelled to the group, "Don't you worry, it's all clear now." As the group traveled down the path, they came upon a section that parted the path around a small section of brush. The brush looked ordinary, yet still it was suspicious. The group was concerned it could be a trap of some kind, or perhaps a small treasure hoard that the goblins buried. Without hesitation, Ulfgar pulled a small metal object from his pack and threw it at the brush. The group was silent for a moment, as the metal made no sound. After exchanging looks and some debate, Lord William took his spear and began to toss some of the leaves around to see if he could peer through the brush to see what was below, yet to no avail. After further deliberation, Anadin grew frustrated and drew his greatsword. Luna and Danilo, that were by his side, both jumped back in surprise, before the Dragonborn swung down on the loosely covered hole, revealing it entirely. It was a hole. Dumbfounded, the group could not believe that this was simply a hole. There had to be more. With a rope from Conrad's pack, he fastened it around the waist of the halfling Danilo and lowered him in. With great caution, Danilo reached the bottom. It was indeed simply a hole. Annoyed and bewildered by the uninteresting and disappointing discovery, the group left the hole behind and continued to follow the tracks. The tracks came to a large opening, a hill with large overgrown grass surrounding the opening of a stone cave, its mouth wide as if there was once a larger stream that ran through the cave. Instead, there was just a small steady trickle and rolling of water cascading down the rocky surface. With the tracks leading to this location, Danilo and Ulfgar took a stealthy approach to see if danger lurked within the cave. Ulfgar was shocked to find the halfling was so incredibly sneaky. He decided to allow him to take the lead. From the mouth of the cave, the two made out that there were two goblin scouts speaking gibberish to each other at the other end. Both in agreement, Danilo attempted to sneak up to the goblins for a surprise strike to silently take them out. Ulfgar to drop the other with a well-placed crossbow bolt. As Danilo approached the stream, he paused. He did not want to step on the stones to alert the goblins, so he carefully takes 2 steps backwards. "What are you doing?" whispered Ulfgar, admittedly too loudly. Then Danilo takes a running start and performs a graceful, yet completely unnecessary front flip over the stream. With the halfling completely landing the stunt without a sound and with a complete ease, Ulfgar lets out a sigh of relief. With a swift blow and whizzing crossbow bolt, the 2 goblins fell. Danilo and Ulfgar share a nod before Ulfgar pulls out a bell from his pack and rings it gently. Several members of the group hear this bell in the distance, and the confusion causes them to approach the cave to find out what happened. They arrive to discover the dead goblins and Danilo and Ulfgar, still holding his bell, waiting by the entrance. The cave is wet and dark, too dark for much of the adventurer's eyes to make out anything. Wanting to avoid being seen, Swahas, using his keen elven eyes, begins to lead the group into the dark cavern. Carefully, with weapons drawn, the group follows the lead of Swahas, Anadin and Lord William, who lead the pack with shields, when they come across what seems to be a kennel of rabid, chained wolves. Lord William and Luna attempt to approach the creatures to calm them as to not alert other goblins that could be in this cave. The creatures at first subtly growl as the two approach. As they get closer, one of the wolves lunges at Lord William, only to be snapped back by the chain around his collar. "I believe these animals to be cursed," said Lord William. "Let us continue." And the group left the wolves chained there. If they had only saved some of the horse meat from earlier. But alas, Conrad was savagely hungry. The group pressed on through the cave, following the stream. With the goblin patrolling the bridge ahead, they decided to head down a leftward tunnel. The path before them was steep and difficult to navigate. Swahas scouted on ahead while the group lie in wait for his return. As the cavern walls turned, he began to see an orange glow cascading along the wet stone walls. He crept forward to discover a pack of goblins surrounding a fire, and what appeared to be a human man beaten and restrained in the corner. With this information, he summoned the group forth. Now with torches in hand, the group ascended to the lit cavern. With the goblins distracted with their own arguing, the adventurers charged forth. Luna called forth vines from the earth to stop the goblins in their tracks as the group pummeled them mercilessly. The goblins, silenced before they even had a chance to draw their weapons. Lord William approached the man, who was half terrified, half relieved. "Who are you, man? Speak," said Lord William. I'm Sildar," said the man. "We were ambushed by goblins on the road, and taken here. I know not of where my companion has been taken." With this information, his bindings were cut. "I thank you, friends. I wish to share more information with you, but I don't know much more other than these goblins have a leader. A vicious animal coated in fur, and much larger than the others. He goes by the name of Clog." Conrad began to threaten the man, looking for compensation, as this was outside the original scope of the contract. But he was calmed as Onadine reached to his shoulder and shook his head in disagreement. The Goliath fell quiet, and the group returned Sildar's armor to him, as it was found on the other side of the room. Together, the group set out to find this Clog, and what may have happened to their friend Gundren. With confidence, having thrashed the goblins, the group proceeded with a swifter pace. Now passing the crude bridge that had been built over the stream, the goblin lookout, taking notice, began to run, but could not let out a cry before Swahas took him down with a well-placed arrow to the throat. Over the bridge was a stairway, leading up to another room lit with fire. They could hear the grumblings of a beast, much different sounding than a goblin. As the group approached, there he stood, an enormous fiend rivaling the size of Conrad. Noticing the intruders, Clog let out a fierce roar, ordering his wolf to charge. Lord William raised his spear to the beast and said, "He's mine!" The adventurers bravely charged in, first subduing the wolf with several swift blows from Danilo. The goblin, accompanying Clog, charged around the corner. Onadine quickly sheathed his axe, and with a swift and sudden whisper, called down a pillar of divine flame, incinerating the goblin. Clog, enraged, unleashed a flurry of blows that were handily deflected by Lord William's shield. With his body littered with arrows and spear wounds, the beast fell. To be continued.